This presentation will be accessible on the USC Career Center YouTube channel if you would like to access our presentation. And if you need to enable captions, you can also do that as well for this presentation. So I'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to Networking for Introverts. I am Stephanie Galindo, and I am from the USC Career Center and am also a fellow introvert. And so I'm hoping with today's workshop, you get a better sense of how you as an introvert or not an introvert can better navigate networking. And so as an introvert myself, I thought it'd be useful to share some tips, tricks that I personally have used in my own networking scenarios. So with that, we'll get started and I'll share the agenda. So we'll learn more about what it means to be an introvert. We'll do a networking overview. We'll dive into some tips. We'll talk about what an elevator pitch is. And then finally, we'll leave time for a Q&A at the end of the session. So before we get started, I thought it would be great to hear from you all to share, no pressure. What comes to mind when you hear the word introvert? So if you feel comfortable typing in the chat, what are things that come to mind when you hear the word introvert? Or if there's a brave soul out there that may want to speak and unmute themselves and share what they think that means, please feel free to let me know what you think. So I am seeing a lot of responses in the chat: staying silent, shy, reserved, people who don't actively seek out conversations with strangers, feel stressed when talking to strangers. I see shy, more shy, overthinking when interacting with others. Talking to lots of people is draining. Someone who feels more comfortable in a small group rather than a large one. Introverts are not comfortable unmuting and speaking. I agree with that. So I'm glad all of you are participating in the chat. Someone said socializing can be draining. Silent, shy, and reserved. Struggles to start the conversation. Self-aware. Listen more than talks. I am loving all this feedback. Self-conscious in a group. Gets energy by being with themselves. So I appreciate you all sharing this. A lot of that resonates from my own experience as an introvert. And hopefully by seeing some of these things, you can kind of realize, maybe you're not the only one feeling drained after a social situation. And so I kind of wanted to go into more specifics of what the true definitions are of introverts, and even how does that compare with that of being an extrovert. So, I saw a lot of different things with, being shy, a lot of conversation about energy, but there's also a lot of misconceptions people have about introverts. So not all introverts are necessarily shy, or not all extroverts are necessarily talkative. And then of course, one is not better than the other. So oftentimes I would say a major misconception is people think because you're an introvert, you're not going to be good at networking. So hopefully you find after today that you carry a lot of strengths that you can bring with you in different networking situations. And so I heard a lot of feedback that introverts, a lot of it relates to energy. And so we want to think of each of us having our batteries that need to be charged. And so an extrovert, their batteries are charged by being with other people. A lot of it is focused on their outer world and everything happening around them. Whereas an introvert, we're energized and we charge our batteries by spending time alone. So extroverts and introverts, as many of you shared, a lot of it is related to how we direct our energy. Another point is that extroverts, they tend to think out loud. So it may be perceived that they like to talk more, but again, a lot of that is focused on the external, whereas the introverts, everything we are going through is in our heads. So a lot of that energy and interaction is internally. So we like to think things through in our heads. Extroverts talk more than listen, whereas introverts listen more than talk. Extroverts communicate with enthusiasm, and then introverts, they may be excited about something, but a lot of it is more internal. So they might keep their enthusiasm to themselves. Extroverts tend to respond pretty quickly, and introverts, they prefer time to think. So, if someone asks you a question, you may not be able to respond right away because you want to think about it. And then extroverts, they may like a lot of things or may have a lot of friends, but introverts are more, and these are general things, it may not apply to you, but it's just a better idea of the differences in the energies in both. And so introverts are really excited about talking about things they're fascinated with or passionate about. So if that's the case, an introvert can really talk a lot about something they really care about. And so hopefully this gives you an idea of what the difference is for an extrovert and introvert. And I'm sure we have a mix in this room. And just to give you an example that, honestly comes to mind is I'm an introvert. My partner is an extrovert. And so we went to a party a couple months ago. And so at the party, he worked the room, he met a lot of people, he talked to them, and he had the best time. As an introvert, I met one person and spoke to that one person the entire party, and I had the best time. So we kind of had different experiences and different ways we wanted to interact at the party. I didn't feel like I needed to meet everyone, whereas he really enjoyed all the multiple interactions. So that's kind of just a difference in how we interact in different social situations. So with this slide, I just really wanted to emphasize my point earlier with networking. It's really important for you as introverts to think about the strengths that you bring. Introverts are great listeners, right? So, my career in education, I studied counseling, I've been a counselor, advisor. That's been my primary role, probably because I'm a good listener. And oftentimes when I meet with people, they just want to be heard, they want to be listened to. And so this is something you can actively do in any networking situation. And so that's with your active listening skills, showing you're engaged, nodding, small interjections, eye contact. You don't need to say a lot, but you can show that you're actively listening and engaged to what the person has to say. Another thing I referenced earlier are introverts are great conversationalists. So, if there's a topic you love, right, you can probably talk hours on end about that. And so, if you find something that you have in common or someone asks you a question about something that you really enjoy, then you can probably have a great conversation about it. And then introverts also think before they speak. And so to me, that says that everything you typically say is meaningful. So maybe you're not raising your hand in class all the time or contributing in every group discussion, but I would say introverts, when they do have to say something, it's something that's important. And then finally, focused on meaningful connections. So introverts, they really love to make meaningful connections. And why I think this is a great point, a huge aspect of networking is forming meaningful connections. And so I think because introverts really want to focus on depth, that is a great way to cultivate relationships in networking. And so we'll talk about what are ways to do that with the rest of the presentation. And then before I jump into everything, this was a quote that I really liked and resonated with me. It's by Susan Cain. So I don't know, if anyone has read the book, Quiet, the Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. That was a book by Susan Cain, and she also has a TED Talk. But she pretty much talks about how the huge misconception, particularly in the world, about what introverts can and can't do. And so she said the quote, "The trick for introverts is to honor their styles instead of allowing themselves to be swept up by prevailing norms." And so the point that I wanted to make about this is, really think about those strengths you have, right? And use that to your advantage and not feel pressured to, be a certain way if that's not who you are. And hopefully we can, talk more about what that means. I'm glad some of you enjoyed that book. I loved it too. And again, I would recommend looking up Susan Cain's TED Talks if you want just some insight on her. So we'll delve into networking 101. So I'm pretty sure most of you already know what networking is, or you just hear that buzzword everywhere. Like, make sure you're networking, right? So, the official definition of networking, the exchange of information or services among individual groups or institution. And the goal is to cultivate productive relationships for your career goals or personal aspirations. So as a student, there are multiple benefits to networking. And so I've listed a few on the slide. It can be different for everyone, right? Perhaps you want to gain advice on a potential industry you want to explore. Maybe you want to learn more about your field, expand your professional network, conduct informational interviews. Another way is to find a mentor. And a huge thing that students want, ultimately find a job. So finding a potential contact to get an interview. And so there are a lot of benefits to networking. And so the next question that I did want to ask you all is, where might you network? And can a few of you throw out ideas on where you might network? Conferences, LinkedIn, campus events, career fair, events on campus. Perfect. So this is timely because our career fair is tomorrow. So I know a lot of you are preparing for career fair. My hope is that after today, you're more comfortable engaging in those networking scenarios. And so networking is pretty much everywhere. And all of you listed that in the chat. It could be in the classroom. It could be in the coffee shop. Fortunately, the Career Center offers tons of ways to practice networking or actually start networking with employers. So as I mentioned, the career fair is one of those ways. We also have a mock interview night coming up in 2 weeks where you can practice interviewing with employers. That would be a great way to do your elevator pitch. But I would say as an introvert, maybe the easiest way to get your feet wet is maybe through LinkedIn or the Trojan Network, right? We can kind of craft an email and take our time and really think about what we're communicating through LinkedIn or Trojan Network through our messages. And maybe after that, we set up a Zoom meeting or a coffee chat, right? So if you want to ease into the networking space, definitely try these platforms. Specifically, I'll mention the Trojan Network, and I saw some of you mention that in the chat. The Trojan Network is our version of LinkedIn. And the beauty of the Trojan Network is USC alumni sign up on the Trojan Network specifically to mentor and guide current students. So they expect these messages from you. They expect, to do informational interviews or answer all your questions. And so if you are interested, I would sign up for the Trojan Network and kind of begin networking on that platform. And then of course, LinkedIn, practically everyone is in LinkedIn. That's also a great way, but I would suggest maybe you could start with finding USC alumni on LinkedIn and finding a way to connect to them. All right, so we're going to start jumping into some of the tips in terms of getting you more comfortable with networking. Someone asked, where do you join the Trojan Network? It is on our website, but at the end of this presentation, we will have a link that you can access. So the first tip that we want to go over is think about your goal or purpose. And some of you may have already heard about SMART goals, but you might be networking for different reasons. And so giving you a goal will provide better strategy of what you want to do. And so goals also motivate you to kind of plan things out, organize your time, really come up with ways on creating your networking plan. So for example, if your goal is to find a job through networking, right? A lot of that networking might be more purposeful, where you focus on attending career fair or all our various Trojan talks, or really pinpoint specific companies or organizations you want to work for in terms of where you place all your efforts. Whereas maybe you're a freshman or a first-year student and you're exploring different industries, maybe you're more open to who you meet with in terms of your informational interviews, and maybe that's scheduling, one outreach a month or whatever it is. So it's just good to think about what your goal is and what your purpose is in terms of networking. The next thing I think is very important, tip number 2, which is to know yourself. So we kind of talked about what that meant in the earlier slide in kind of understanding who an introvert is. So I don't want you to think networking as an overwhelming thing, but start small, right? And that could mean multiple things. You could reach out to people you already know. If you are hoping to find an internship with Amazon, well, you don't need to just reach out to someone you don't know. What if you already know someone who works there? So that will make it less intimidating for you. Or another strategy in terms of starting small is, could you create your own networking opportunity? Maybe you invite your classmates to, the coffee shop after class to get to know each other. Could that lead to something? Another thing which I like to do, I think it's intimidating going to large networking events. When I first started working at USC, our division would do coffee chats with other offices. But what made me more comfortable was bring a colleague with me. So I wasn't by myself. And it was kind of nice because they could introduce me to someone else in another department that they already know. So feel free to bring a friend if you don't want to do it on your own. The other thing is to know when you're at your best. So only you can answer this, right? I would say an example is, if you're not a morning person, don't sign up for a morning coffee chat, right? I'm going to go back to the whole battery charging idea. If you've had a long day of presentations and interactions and meetings with people, you may not be at your best for that evening networking event, right? So really understand when you need more time to be at your best. And then that kind of goes along with the next point, weigh the benefits of a network opportunity. So you don't have to go to every single thing, right? Especially if you think, okay, maybe this is going to be a very large event, maybe I prefer smaller events. So it's okay to not go to everything and really decide if this networking opportunity is worth your while. And so that might be focusing on more one-on-one interactions with employers that you might have the opportunity to meet versus going to a huge conference. So that's really something for you to think about and really decide. But I'll also say it's good to try new things, right? When you're at your best, take that risk and maybe go to that conference because you never know who you'll meet. The next step is to plan ahead. So this works personally for me, right? I'm the most comfortable, confident when I know what to expect, right? From the detail of, okay, I know where this event is. I've prepared, to see how long it's going to take me to get there. You're less stressed about those things. But more than anything, doing your research ahead of time, like who will be at this networking event and what are some sample questions that I can have in my back pocket and be able to ask once I get there. And the next slide, we'll talk about what those questions are. And then practicing your introduction and elevator pitch. You want to be able to share who you are in a short time period. And just to give you context, everyone hears elevator pitch. The idea is, let's say you get onto an elevator and your dream CEO of your company steps into that elevator. Well, this is your opportunity and your window to share who you are until they get off on the next floor, right? So what's going to hit them with your top accomplishments about who you are and why they should even consider you or want to connect to you. So really practicing what that elevator pitch is. And then again, we'll talk about this in a couple of slides. And then I mentioned this already, research the person or organizations you may be meeting. So if you do plan to go to the career fair tomorrow, we give you all the information. As long as you RSVP, you can see who's attending the organizations. My advice to you is choose, all the organizations you want to meet, go on their websites, who's on LinkedIn that's a recruiter for that organization, just get a better sense of who they are. So once you're able to have a conversation with them, you're better prepared to show that you've done your research and you have a better sense of how to carry on a conversation with them because you know what the organization is all about or you know who the person is. Plus, recruiters want to know that you've done your research as well. So the next slide is conversation 101. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm an introvert. So my least favorite thing to do is small talk. Like I don't want to do it, but I'm going to share with you all that this is a skill that you will need to have whether you like it or not. So I'm going to challenge you to really get comfortable with small talk, right? It could be that you are on an elevator for an interview and someone gets on the elevator with you. You don't know who that person is, but you might want to just ask a quick question or say, hi, how are you? You just never know who you're going to meet. So I really encourage you to be more comfortable with small talk. And it's a great way to break the ice. So, when I meet with students during advising sessions, I just have my set question, right? How's your semester going so far? How are classes going? And this kind of makes them feel more comfortable in sharing, what's been going on with them. And it just makes it easier to continue a conversation with them. And so you can also do this at career fair. You know, your first question could be, how's your day going so far? And so just get comfortable, and I provided some sample questions that you can use in terms of having those introductory questions that you can have with employers. The other thing with networking is that you don't want to ask closed-ended questions. You want to stick to open-ended questions. The reason that is because you want the conversation to continue versus, you know, it's a yes, no answer, and that's the end of the conversation. And so we'll talk about what the tiara method is to give you an idea of the types of questions you could ask. And then after you've had, you know, you've asked how they are, you've asked a few open-ended questions. It's, you know, another hard thing is, how do you end the conversation? So you can always thank them for their time, let them know what you will do next as a result of their advice, or, you know, this is very common and a great way to network. What's a way you can stay in touch and share updates or continue the conversation? So you can ask for their business card, or a lot of people will ask if they can add them on LinkedIn. So that's very common to do, and it's a great way to stay connected. So in terms of actual questions, I mentioned the Tiara method by Steve Dalton. So he wrote a book on, I believe it's called the 2-Hour Job Search, but he worked for an MBA program. And so he created this format for networking questions. Feel free to like take a screenshot or picture of these questions. But you can see, you know, the idea with the tiara method is, when you meet with someone, you kind of treat them as an expert in the field or of their area, but the questions get more specific, where it kind of shifts in tone and depth, so that you kind of see them more as a mentor or someone who can kind of coach you and become an advocate for you. So just to give you a better idea of what that means, right? With tiara, T is for trends. You're asking general questions at this point. You know, what are trends impacting your organization? How has your industry changed? You know, this is very informational, right? It's going to get a little bit more specific. So what are some insights? What's surprising to you about this job? What's the best lesson you've learned? You can ask them for advice. And then now you're asking for more guidance, personal guidance, where they can serve as a mentor. What resources should I be sure to look into next? What are steps you would recommend for someone in my situation? And then for the last section, assignments, have you had any interns in the past? If so, what sorts of projects have they done? Have any projects increased in popularity recently at your organization? What I love about these questions, you know, let's say that they have hired interns in the past or new grads. This is your opportunity to share, you know, oh, that sounds great. I've actually done something in my previous coursework or previous internship. How could I learn more about applying for this internship opportunity? So that's kind of your opening to see if there's a possibility for you. Or, you know, have any projects increased in popularity recently at your organization? You know, let's say it's a project that you created or you've done something similar through, you know, previous experience. You know, this is your way to kind of share what you've done and kind of open it up to see if there's opportunities available for you. And so these are just some sample questions you can kind of play around with and practice with, and also use during career fair tomorrow or any of your networking opportunities. But yeah, it's always good to come prepared with questions so you're not nervous and you have a better sense of what to expect. All right, so tip 4, become comfortable with self-promotion. So self-promotion is difficult because it forces an introvert to talk about themselves, when our natural preference is to keep everything to ourselves, right? Where everything is with our thoughts internally. We don't like to talk about ourselves. And so the whole purpose or part of networking is to be able to promote yourself. And so I really want you all to become comfortable with that idea. And if you haven't realized that, this is a skill that you can learn and you can practice. You know, so once I'm sure some of you are saying, I'm just bad at networking. Well, you're not going to get better at it until you practice. Or, you know, maybe you're not good at presenting. You're going to have to keep practicing. And so to become comfortable with self-promotion or sharing who you are and your strengths, start with really thinking about what your accomplishments are and what your strengths are. You know, if you have a resume, you've already done that, right? Think about, you know, what are some projects you've done or experiences you've had, awards you've, you know, gotten that really showcase who you are. And as you think about interacting with employers, one thing you should start thinking about is, what is it that you really want them to know about you? So that's where the inventory is. What is your highlight? Like if they leave the conversation, what is the one thing you want them to know about you before the conversation ends, right? And then just to reframe the idea that you're not bragging about yourself, these are facts, right? Yes, I won that award. Yes, I had a 3.5 GPA. Yes, I was captain of the volleyball team, right? It's not bragging, but it's who you are and what you bring to the table. And then the last point I wanted to make is no one else will promote you, right? This is you. So if you don't promote yourself, no one else will. So really get comfortable with the idea of really sharing who you are and what your strengths are. So with that, I know I referenced this earlier. This is your elevator pitch. This is the best way to promote who you are in many scenarios, right? All of you started classes about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I'm sure you did class introductions around the room. This is your elevator pitch, right? Tomorrow, when you meet with an employer, this will be your elevator pitch. You come for an advising appointment, you want to share your pitch, you know, give us an idea of who you are. You attend a coffee chat or a Trojan network. You go on an interview where they ask you, tell me about yourself. This is your elevator pitch. So this is something you should continue to practice and refine until, you know, you feel good about what you're saying about who you are. And so the next couple slides, you know, my hope is that you have a better idea of creating a pitch that best represents you. So typically your pitch should include your name, major, interests, and inquiry. And what I mean by inquiry, what's your call to action? What's your ask? Is it learning more about an opportunity? Is it connecting on LinkedIn? And so a lot of people respond to, especially when networking, respond to some sort of ask or action-oriented way they can, you know, help you. Another good way to think about your elevator pitch is format-wise. You could start with your past, present, and then future experiences. You know, maybe you were an athlete in high school and now you're at USC majoring in X, and my goal is to be Y. So that could be another way to format your elevator pitch. And then there's also the delivery of your pitch, right? Really think about your nonverbal language, and you want to be positive. Maybe we're not the most enthusiastic externally, but you know, we may have to step out of our box as well to kind of show the smiles and the positivity. maintain eye contact. And then also when we're nervous, and I'm guilty of this as well, there are a lot of filler words that we use. Like basically, actually, so you'll want to be aware when you're using these filler words. And we do have tools where you can practice your elevator pitch. One of them is called Big Interview, and another one is called VMOC, which has a new elevator pitch option where you can record yourselves, watch yourself, answering a question, such as tell me about yourself, and then get feedback on how you answer that question. Or, if you're able to record yourself answering a question, you can see, okay, maybe I used like one too many times. Another way, of course, is to meet with one of us, a career advisor, and we can help you refine your elevator pitch so you're more comfortable and give you feedback. So I wanted to be sure to share examples of what an elevator pitch could look like. This really depends on what you're doing, where you are. So if you recall at the beginning, we talked about what your goals are. Depending on what your goals are, your elevator pitch could be different. So if we're just at the career fair doing an icebreaker question, hi, I'm Tommy Trojan. Thank you for coming to the USC campus. How's your day gone so far? So here's kind of the small talk. Then comes your introduction. It's always good to have your introduction down. I'm a junior at USC majoring in business. I'm interested in an internship with a market research firm because I believe it would combine my interest in marketing with my strong analytical and research skill sets. So from this short introduction, I know what year they are in school, right? So they're still eligible for internships. They're not graduating yet. What their major is, I know what their interests are, and I know some of their strong skill sets are analytical and research. And so that was what I was able to get from that. And then the other part of your elevator pitch is your inquiry, as I mentioned, right? So at a career fair, I was hoping you could tell me more about the internship I saw on Connect SC. At a networking mixer, right? Maybe your goal is not for a job, but get to know people. So a great question would be, what is your role at Troy Marketing? How do you enjoy working there? What do you look for in marketing research candidates? And so some of that will go back to the questions we talked about in the earlier slides. This just gives you a quick format on crafting your pitch. And again, if you want to take a screenshot of this and keep a copy, I think it does a good breakdown of how to organize your pitch. So again, intro. One thing I'll add about the intro is that in addition to your name, major, and school, is there something unique about you that differentiates you from another candidate? So if you're an athlete, if you're a veteran, or if you're from a very specific hometown, if there's something that you think might be of interest about who you are, feel free to mention that in your introduction. People like making personal connections. All of you are USC students, so I'm sure when you are at the airport or at the store with your USC swag, someone will come up to you and say, hi, I went to USC too, right? So people really like those personal connections. So if that's something you can add to your introduction, that would be great. The next part is what's just a description of your experience. So you'll really have to hone in on what matters most for this specific scenario, right? So if this is career fair, we're not going to talk about every single experience you've had, but what is the experience relevant to the internship roles you're applying for? And so how have you demonstrated that interest? Could it be through a student org you were involved in? Could it be through volunteer work? And then how are you qualified? So maybe you did do an internship, or maybe you have specific skills that you gained through some projects you worked on. Maybe there's an award you received or specific accomplishments. So really think about what experience you want to highlight, and then give them an idea of what your goals are. What are your professional goals? And then this will lead to your call to action. So explain what you're working towards, why. And then again, there were several examples we talked about. This call to action could just be simply gaining insight, expressing interest, or just making a connection. And so with that, I really want to use this time for all of you to craft your pitch. And so I'm going to take a pause, let's say 2 minutes or less, for each of you to write your pitch down, just so you have something that you could leave this session with, and it can be a pitch you write and then practice in front of the mirror after today's workshop, practice with a friend, practice with your roommate. But let's take a couple minutes for you to craft your pitch. And so I'll pause and let you think about that and write that down. Okay, so hopefully you all have something written down that you feel good about. I will ask if there is one person willing to share their pitch to the group. I know this is every introvert's nightmare, but I'll see if there's someone brave out there who's willing to share their pitch with us. Is there anyone out there? No takers? All right. Okay, I won't.
I can go ahead and share.
Thank you.
Okay.
So we will have Amanda share. Thank you for sharing. Go ahead, Amanda.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Amanda Hernandez. I'm currently working as a full-time software engineer, and I'm completing a master's in integrated design, business, and technology at the IYA school. And I've been involved in this augmented reality app project for one of my classes, and I'm planning on pursuing that for capstone. So I joined this networking session to get a better feel for what people kind of need in those situations. And yeah, I'm open to talking about how to make the career fair, more engaging with an augmented reality app like the one I'm working on. So
Good job, Amanda. Thank you. Let's do our virtual claps for Amanda. That was a great job. I'm sure that wasn't easy, but I learned a lot about Amanda within those 30 seconds, what she's studying, what she's passionate about, her call to action. So for her, she's really focusing on, how she can learn more about that in the career fair. So great job, Amanda. Thank you. So hopefully, all of you can practice today or tomorrow, whenever it is, and become more comfortable. This is a pitch that will change, right? As you start gaining more experience in your program, some of you mentioned you may not have a ton of experience, which is totally fine. You can still do a pitch with, any skills or strengths that you have. As you start gaining more skills, that will change, right? Well, where we may be less focused on high school if you're a first year student, so your elevator pitch will be different once you're graduating or once you've completed your master's degree. So the next part is, we're going towards our later tips of what happens after the whole networking process. And so anytime you create a networking connection, you want to be reliable. So be available, show up on time, follow up, and stay connected. So as you meet the employers at the career fair or after a coffee chat, make sure you follow up with them. I think it's also helpful to kind of document your progress, right? Okay, I emailed so-and-so on this day. Maybe I'll put it on my calendar to follow up in a month, right? It's okay if they don't get back to you. I wouldn't take it personally. They could be busy. Or maybe, your email got lost, but it's okay to send a follow-up email within 2 weeks. I would say networking, there's no one way to do it. So it's kind of like dating. If you never hear back from them after multiple emails, that's when you have to let go of that opportunity. Maybe they don't want to continue that connection, and that's completely fine. Whereas if someone is, regularly engaging with you, then this is a good connection to have, right? So just put your best foot forward and keep trying. And then it's important to nourish your connections as well, right? After that one coffee chat, it just doesn't end there. So a common question I get is, how do I continue these relationships or these networks? So I would say continue to provide updates about where you are and everything, right? Maybe you just completed a project or joined a club that would be of interest to them. Or if there's any milestones they shared, like their work anniversary or their birthday, feel free to, send messages to them about that. If there's an article or a change that happened within their company that you're aware of, maybe you can send that article to them. Or, after your conversation, maybe you implemented something or you successfully got the interview. Make sure you update them on your successes. And then know that networking is just not take. It's like a relationship that goes both ways. So it's also important to be aware of what you have to offer as a contact, and I don't know what that answer is, right? But think about, maybe you're really good at a specific technical skill and are willing to provide insight or ideas, or, because you're a student, there's a different perspective that they will value and may want to hear of. So always be sure to let them know how you can help them as well. Or if they need anything, you're always willing to, be helpful in that way. And then, if you're networking a lot, you can get mixed up with who's who and wears what. So again, it goes with the tracking in terms of remembering who works where, because you really don't want to mix up that information. So just try to stay organized as best you can. Okay, so this is our very last tip. I know we're coming to a close. It is a video that I really love. The next tip is step out of your comfort zone while respecting your introvert self. So I'm going to play a video by Susan Cain, and hopefully this can kind of share, what we mean in terms of networking as an introvert.
There's an idea called free trait theory, and it comes from a fantastic personality psychologist named Brian Little. Professor Little is a very strong introvert. He's also a world-class public speaker. He is one of the best public speakers you will ever see. And when he's on stage, you would have no idea that he's an introvert. And he does it because he cares so much about the ideas that he wants to convey and about his audiences that he's just giving every drop of himself. But when he gets off that stage, he is utterly drained and doesn't want to do the small talk. So he kind of jokes around about it, but it's true. He will always race off to the nearest restroom where he can hide and be by himself. And from this personal experience grew a whole field of psychology that he invented called free trait theory. And this is the idea that all of us have our core passions, work that we love and people that we love. And in the service of these core passions, we have to sometimes act out of character. And it's uncomfortable to do that. But that's okay if we're acting out of character in the service of things that really matter. But it's only okay if we then take what Professor Little calls restorative niches, which are the places we go or the things that we do to bring us back into character. If you have a day full of pitch meetings, you want to also schedule a solitude meeting with yourself, and that's going to be your restorative niche. No matter what life you are living, every life calls for you to act out of character some of the time, and it's only okay to do that if you feel entitled to come back and be yourself.
So I love that video, especially with the restorative niches. I really want you all to think about what that means for you. I really, as an introvert, am starting to realize when I need more alone time, because it's been straight, interactions with people. So if you're okay with sharing in the chat, what are some restorative niches that you want to implement or you already have? For me, I like journaling or, listening to podcasts. So feel free to share in the chat with the group some areas that really help you recharge, and, make sure you have your time for yourself. Thank you for sharing, everyone. And I'm sure some of you will be doing the exact same things: napping, reading, playing with your dog, baking, gaming. All those are great ways to do that. And so I just wanted to end today with just a quick summary and some takeaways for you all. Hopefully you have a better sense of who you are and knowing yourself as an introvert, and really understanding or figuring out what works best for you in terms of different networking techniques and scenarios. Your pitch may change depending on your experiences. Practice. I'm going to emphasize that because I think that's the best way to be comfortable. Stay positive, follow up, make time for your restorative niches. If that means running into the bathroom for 2 minutes, totally fine. And, going back to the video, what really resonated me is sometimes we will have to be out of character, and that's okay. And it's not that you're not being yourself. You will have to be out of character for career fair temporarily to really self-promote who you are. But after that, get back to, what feels right and comfortable. especially if it's something you're passionate about. We kind of have to play that part to get there. And then finally, just be yourself and really be okay with who you are and knowing your strengths as an introvert. And with that, I did want to end with just some resources, and then I will stay back for any questions. We have about 2 more minutes. These are our fall events. I will point out the Fall Career Fair tomorrow on Truesdale Parkway. Mock interview night with USC alumni, that's September 26th. You can go on our website. This is a great way to practice your elevator pitch with alumni and really get comfortable networking in a very safe and supportive environment. So that's a great event to go to, but feel free to attend any of these programs and more. And then someone asked about the Trojan Network. This is the QR code that takes you directly to our website, or you can just go on the Career Center website and search for Trojan Network, and it'll take you right to there and you can create an account. And then you are welcome to, touch base with the career advisor if you have more questions about that. And then this is all of our contact information. We are all over social media. I highly recommend our Instagram page, which is updated with a lot of information. You can scan the QR code if you'd like to receive our newsletters, which is very informational on upcoming events. And then, as I mentioned, this is recorded. So thank you for attending. It will be posted on our Career Center YouTube in a couple of days. So if you'd like to reference this, you can just go to our YouTube page and be able to watch the workshop again if you'd like. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone for being here today. I will hang back if there are any questions about anything, but thanks for joining me during your lunch hour.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hi, Stephanie. Would you mind going back to the page just a couple slides ago that listed all of the different events?